we want to start off this entire event with a land acknowledgement for the land that UCSB currently inhabits. And so we ask you to join us in acknowledging the Chumash peoples, their elders, both past and present, as well as their future generations. We would like to take this opportunity for all of us to reflect on how the work we do here today in our search for knowledge, our opportunities to teach, and every day in our chosen fields affects these lands and the peoples of these lands that we work with and research and protect. We acknowledge that the university system was founded upon exclusions of and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose lands this institution is located, the villages and unceded lands of the Chumash people. This UCSB administration has failed to faithfully and dutifully support the traditional custodians of these lands, Chumash people and indigenous students, through their continued support of Manakia.
And feel free to say hello in the chat and put in where you're tuning from. And if you don't currently know, you can add your city and state and text this number, which is 907-312-5085. And I'll put it in the chat. You just have to text your city and state and they'll respond back with the native land.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kai. Before we turn it over to our amazing panelists, we want to let y'all know a little bit about us who planned it. So I'll be introducing Kai. Kermina Youssef, or Kai, she, they, is a fourth-year sociology major and a sociology and environmental studies double major with a minor in being my roommate. They created the Intersectional Feminism Club 2 years ago in order to create more inclusive space for all identities on campus and to marginalize provide key Park students all around the UCSB area. And she's currently the co-chair and was a big part in planning this event, and we're so thankful for her. She is also a founding member of Red Umbrellas, a new student-led advocacy organization that works every day for the decriminalization and destigmatizations of sex work and offers many decompression spaces all around the SB area. She's an advocate, she's an educator, and she has worked all 4 years of her time at UCSB to raise awareness of how this institution hurts its students and fight back against those injustices. Thank you so much for being here, Kai.
Thank you so much, Joey, for that amazing introduction. And I'll just go back and turn it to you and just give you a little spotlight. So I'll tell you a little bit about Joey. So Joel Medina, he, him, his pronouns, is a fourth-year Soc major with a minor in applied psych. He has worked at the RCSGD for 3 years, where he works to advocate for marginalized students at an institutional level. He's been involved in campus organizations like Hermanas Unidas and La Familia de Colores, and has worked really hard to secure internships at advocacy orgs like Equality California, the Victoria Institute, and League of United Latin American Citizens. He's also very excited that this is his last event that he's putting using at his time at UCSB, and it's one that he's always wanted to put on. So thank you so much, Joey. And I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists and our amazing facilitator. And also, I just want to give a shout out to the RCSGD's team for putting in work, and also Red Umbrellas, Kasha and Lizzie, and IFM board members, Rebecca and Christina.
Thank you all so much again, Karina, for that marvelous introduction. We're almost done talking. I was going to introduce one more person, the amazing facilitator for this event, who we're super honored to have, Professor Terrence Wooten. He serves in the Department of Black Studies and UCSB. He got his, I'm reading his amazing biography from our website, it's beautiful. He received his PhD in American Studies from the University of Maryland. He is currently working on his first book manuscript, Lurking in the Shadows of Home, Homelessness, Carcerality, and the Figure of the Sex Offender, which examines how those who have been designated sex offenders and are homeless in the Maryland, D.C. area are managed and regulated through social policies, sex offender registries, and urban and architectural design. His scholarly interests are located at the intersections of Black studies, gender and sexuality studies, studies of poverty and homelessness, and carceral studies. Professor Wooten is an amazing advocate, educator, and intellectual at UCSB campus who is always fighting for marginalized folk, and we're so excited to have him speaking with us today. Professor Wooten, if you want to take it away, thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction. The last event, I think the last event of your life should just be going around giving my introduction. I'm like, wait a minute, who is that person? I want to be that person. So first, I do have to say, no joke, all jokes aside, thank you to the RCSGD for putting this together, Joey and Kai for the countless labor that you do to carve space and hold space, amplify the voices of folks who are marginalized and discriminated against. You all are shining examples of the types of students that draws faculty to come to institutions. And so thank you for modeling what it means to be a gaucho and what people should aspire to to when thinking about what it means to be a gaucho. I have the distinguished pleasure of introducing our panelists today. Yeah, actually, real quick, can we give the hand claps and reactions and just overall share the love for these two amazing organizers of this event. Organizing an event's not easy. Organizing an event as an undergraduate during a pandemic is like, it's work, okay? And so we see you and honor your labor, so thank you. And to honoring of labor, I have the opportunity to introduce our three panelists, one who is not currently here, but hopefully will show up soon.
He is here now.
Oh, okay, well, just kidding. So our three panelists today. So we're gonna, for format, we're going to have conversations amongst the four of us, but mostly I'm just gonna ask questions and facilitate because I'm gonna fade to back or to the back. We're gonna leave space for Q&A about 20 minutes at the end. I'm going to encourage you that if you have a question, to write that question down and then hold on to it and not drop it in the chat towards the end for two reasons. One, because we're going to encourage you to sit and listen openly and critically, to engage, to listen, to learn. And two, because functionally, we don't want to miss your question. So I'll kind of cue when it is that you should start dropping those questions in the chat. So without further ado, let me introduce our amazing panelists in no particular order because they're all super dope and super fly. So we have Z Extramica. She, her is a badass, queer, Black, perpetually wandering writer and academic hoe. She is currently studying the way Black feminism can help us to understand, support, and uplift sex workers living with disability. She is Black Sex Worker Collective's Berlin branch coordinator. She serves her passion for Black liberation, particularly for Black femmes who fight white supremacy with their very existence. Her tools are writing, community outreach, and policy work within the sex worker community and other grassroots organizations. Next, we'll have Giselle Madison Parker, who is the founder and CEO of Gender Fabulous, one word. She is a healer, advocate, writer, and performer who centers love, compassion, and unity in her work. Giselle has worked in community advocacy for over 10 years, specifically community initiatives that uplift LGBTQ+ folks, people of color, and those who are most socioeconomically oppressed. As an out and visible queer trans woman of color, she understands resilience and the healing power of love. Giselle's work has given her the opportunity of being a guest at the White House for the annual Transgender Community Briefing, a featured spoken word artist on the first international all-trans mixtape Trans Trenders, a keynote speaker at Rutgers University for the New Jersey Trans Youth Forum, and featured in the photo exhibit Shine 100 Women of Long Beach. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Jay St. James, who is an intersex activist and full-service sex worker. They are a 20+ year career worker and currently reside in Nevada with hopes of being less criminalized. Jay's family has a genetic trait leading to intersex development. Jay had early familiar representation, a very queer-friendly environment, and was still subject to very cis-centered gender expectations. So without further ado, if we can also give a round of applause and hand claps, love, and celebrations for our amazing panelists. Thank you for being here. We're very excited to have you. So I want to start out by acknowledging that I read what is a snapshot of your life. And so the first question I have, as a scholar in Black Studies, the amazing Christina Sharp tells us that the job of Black Studies is to comfort, care for, and defend the dead. And I see the work that you all are doing as a way of comforting and caring for and defending your communities. And I'm wondering if each of you can take the time to share with us how it is that you came and arrived at doing this work of comforting, caring for, and defending your communities. And if we don't mind, I'm going to start out with, I'm just going to do this, sorry. I'm going to start out with Z.
Okay, thank you. I'm Z Examica. Thank you all for having me. So I have actually been working in human rights in some way, shape, or form for about 10 years. I did my first internship at 18 with Jamaica Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals, and Gays. And that is kind of where I realized that, you know, at first it was that the life that I'd led so far was very privileged. And that was also a moment when I started to transition out of the expectations that protected me. So like the idea that I'm straight and that I'm middle class and, you know, going to school and stuff like that. And I really started to realize that these things that protect me are not afforded to a lot of people, and that I do have an obligation to make sure that these things are not barriers. So formal education should not be a barrier to liberation or to self-empowerment. You know, your gender identity, your sexual orientation should not be an issue that prevents your quality of life from being at, you know, the best as it can be. And as I realized that, I also realized that, oh, I am a lesbian and I am, you know, not as conventional as I thought. So it kind of became a very personal fight for me, because then I found myself, instead of trying to advocate on behalf of people who were in a different community, I was advocating on behalf of my community. And that really gave me a lot of passion. And the next step was in reproductive justice. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth. And now I'm working for the Black Sex Worker Collective, which is just amazing because it's just such a no nonsense kind of grassroots organization that's really about the work. And so, yeah, that is a brief outline of how I got here.
Thank you for that. Jay, if you would mind sharing.
Yeah, so I actually did not really get into it because of my marginalization of being born intersex. I had great family representation. My aunt is intersex, it was always talked about. I just had a school assignment in junior high where I had to shadow someone professionally. I shadowed a reporter to City Hall, and I saw that individual people could get up and speak for 3 minutes on anything they wanted to. They'd have certain topics, and then at the end, anything new you wanted to introduce, you could speak directly to city council, directly to the mayor, and they had to record it in the minutes. There was a record of it. So that just fascinated me, that anybody who wanted to use their voice could get that legitimacy and could get, put in the city hall minutes and get all their concerns, complaints, anything they wanted to say in a 3-minute period would be documented and become a part of the city's history. That just struck me as something really powerful, really accessible. From there, I went into doing more specific work. I volunteered with the AIDS Foundation in a town, back in the 90s, did a lot of AIDS quilts and stuff. But I think those early experiences of shadowing that reporter really let me see that anything I got involved in and anything I had a passion in, the people who make the decisions and write the checks have to listen to me if I just show up.
That was a bar. Jay just dropped a bar, and then just and next, Giselle. Who I think is still with us.
Trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm not that tech savvy. And I'm on POC time. So, how did I get involved in sex work advocacy is the question. I kind of stumbled into it. I've always done advocacy work and activism around marginalized folks, being a Black, trans, queer woman, navigating so many intersections. But having to have done sex work for my own survival, it's not something that was often talked about. I live in a very Republican, very white county in the East Coast, and it's pretty isolated, right? There's not a lot of, when I think of access to Black and brown, queer, and trans folks, there's not a lot of access where I live. Uh, so talking about sex work and coming out as someone who had done it was not something I talked about. And then I was invited to a space where I didn't have, no longer had to hide that part of myself. I no longer had to carry that shame. And I was invited to include sex work advocacy in my work, which was something that I had been doing, but not aware of it, right? Not consciously doing it. And it has been liberating not to have to uh, be ashamed of certain parts of ourselves, because sex work is very stigmatized. It's not seen as labor. But we know sex can be very transactional, honey. Whether you're getting $1 or a candy bar or nothing at all. So just dismantling that shame and being in spaces where it was okay to talk about sex work. And yeah, that's how I got into sex work advocacy.
Thank you for your sharing. And that was a kind of setup to what might seem like a slightly awkward next question, but I want to give you my rationale. We're going to start talking about a lot of complex systems. And oftentimes, understandably, when we talk about sex work and the lived experiences of particularly of queer, trans, of color sex workers, gender nonconforming, of color sex workers, the question of violence of necessarily comes up. Intimate partner violence, state violence, structural violence, inequality, and the theme stigma. Before we go there, I think what I want to make sure happens is that we don't overwrite the fact that you all have a full humanity that is not just articulated through the violences that you experiences and the violences that you combat, which is part of that stigma of how your full humanity gets collapsed. So in commitment to articulating and understanding your full humanity, I want to ask a question that might seem really random, but I hope my rationale makes sense. You all still experience, and you see this in the writing of your bios, passion and pleasure and joy, and the word love came up. So I want to just very simply ask, what are things right now that are giving you joy, that are giving you life, are sustaining and giving you energy? And whether that is a moment, whether that is a memory, that is something that has not yet come and materialize, what is giving you life? Because I want to not forget that part of your lives and your experience as we move forward. And so in no particular order, I'm putting people on the spot. This is just how it works. I'm gonna ask Jay to go first.
For me, definitely my children. I'm a parent to four. I have two that are younger, 7 and 9. I've been separated from them for about a year because of all the political stuff going on with the riots and stuff. So the mass direct action in the US is giving me a lot of joy. My children are giving me a lot of joy. Buying a house, I'm focusing on that level of stability in my life for the first time at 41. Those are the things that are personally giving me joy.
Thank you for that. Z?
Yeah, so I just finished my degree, and I am, after 15 years as an expat, I am repatriating to Jamaica in a month. And I am going there to continue my advocacy and to continue my organizing and just to refamiliarize myself with my culture. And I am just so excited and just so energized to deal with all the crap that I'm dealing with here, just knowing that I don't have to deal with this for more than another month. So yeah, that's my joy right now.
Snaps around. Giselle?
So I would say being in spaces like this, having conversations like this, give me joy, give me life, give me hope, refresh me, and re-energize me. Seeing so many, seeing queer, trans, Black and brown, indigenous brilliance on the screen gives me life and joy. Megan Thee Stallion gives me joy. Twerking gives me joy. Trap music gives me joy. A piece of cake and a good weave gives me joy. Things that are really small, you know, just knowing that I'm loved and I'm appreciated. Being able to tell folks that I love them is really important to me. Being able to dance and be creative. Waking up is a joy because as a Black trans woman, I know that my life is a miracle. And, you know, I'm just grateful that my ancestors have lifted me to live in this day and time and to exist. I'm just grateful for that. And that brings me joy.
And all of your answers just like legitimately, I got flutters. Like, you know, is so thank you. So in your joy and how it is that you get and give and have joy, you also give joy. And I want to acknowledge that and how your presence itself and the work that you do is also life affirming and life sustaining and gives other people life. I want to now take a very somber turn, but holding that question of joy and pleasure always at the same time so that we break down these dichotomies. Jay mentioned the protests that are happening in the US. And as we know, we saw a summer of last summer, a flourishing of protests against state-sanctioned violence, particularly at the hands of the police. And we also saw critiques of the absence of trans and gender nonconforming folks in those protests and in those discourses. And so I want to ask a question about the role of sex worker community collectives and organizers, because we see this call as a result for abolition and defunding the police at the same time that we see a call for decriminalizing sex work. And it's a sticking point for abolition is often this question of, well, what about the violence that happens to folks, gendered sexual violence? And the decriminalization discourse tells us that actually criminalizing sex work makes sex workers more vulnerable to gendered and sexual violence, often at the hands of the police. And then so in the absence of that, of structures, state sanctioned structures to protect sex workers, you all have had to build systems of support and care for each other that I honestly think are the models for what it means that what community safety looks like. And so I'm wondering if you all can share what it is that you all are doing in your organizations, in your personal lives, and your collectives to build and sustain and support each other around questions of safety and community stability in the absence of state-sanctioned, state-supported services. And I'm going to do a horrible moderator job, and by saying whoever wants to go first, and then if there's like a super low lag, I'm going to be an obnoxious kindergarten teacher and call on somebody. Not that kindergarten teachers are obnoxious, but I'm going to be one.
So I'll just, I'll chime in. I think there are so many intersections when it comes to the work, right? Sex work and what that is, right? Because it's really very inclusive of a lot of different things. So I think it depends on the industry you're in too, right? If you are someone that does cam work, what safety and communicating and keeping each other safe may look a bit different versus a street worker who is probably who has the highest risk when it comes to violence and danger, right? Uh, when it comes to police and it comes to the clients we serve. So that the systems or structures of safety may look different within the work. I think having Z and I are part of a few collectives, and I think that is one way that we communicate with each other, how we keep each other safe, how we check in on each other, and we see what are our needs. And if someone is dealing with a certain situation or with folks that may not be safe, how we can come together to rally around that person and keep each other safe. So keeping in constant communication is one thing, and checking in on each other, which I think is an important structure when we think about community safety and keeping communities safe, right? Checking in on each other, number one, and communicating when there are, if there are risk factors, right? Or there are some foreseen dangers. What do we do? Plan, what do we do when that happens? And when it happens, how do we keep each other safe?
Yeah, yeah, Giselle really touched on something important because like sex workers depend a lot on informal information channels. And that means like social media, like blacklist sites, things like that. And these are the tools that keep us safe and also the tools that are being taken away from us. So it forces us to get very creative, and I think it's a testament to our resilience that even with this challenge of maintaining our safe spaces, like we still manage to keep in touch. We're not divided, like we still manage to maintain our connections. And that is definitely important to keeping each other safe because the more people know about what is happening, or the wider the group of people that who know about what is happening, the harder it is to hide it and to sweep it under the rug. And a lot of the information that affects sex workers isn't actually accessible. So there's like laws that are, very complicatedly, their language is complicated, and a lot of people don't have the time to sit down and read 50 pages of a bill that's going to affect them because they have work and they have children and they have responsibilities, and that's not something they can commit to. And so I see the role of of organizations, especially as like a contact point for sex workers to get access to resources and information that might not otherwise be available or readily available to them, and to kind of know where to go look and to put sex workers in touch with each other when needed. And of course, to provide mutual aid and monetary aid because that is always necessary.
Yeah, I would definitely second the informal communication sources. That's a big thing, letting us know who's safe to see, who's not safe to see. I notice very much in the sex work community. I've just recently gotten into the online community just in the last few years, but I've been in sex work since the 90s. I do a mix of indoor and what's considered outdoor. Um, Anywhere I go, I can instantly find the sex work community. I can meet them. And it's always very much for me been an experience that I'm taken in any part of the world by other workers. I'm given camaraderie, I'm given community. I very much operate that if you touch one of us, you touch all of us. If there's a bad client in the area that's affected somebody, they've affected me. They've got me searching them down, putting out their personal information, giving them 2 steps for the 1 step they gave that person, because I don't want that danger coming near me. And with me, still doing a lot of what's, considered outdoor and meeting people on the fly, I don't always have the time to do background checks or the ability to do that and stuff. This last year, because of the protests, I got very much put in the public eye, and I experienced some very direct police persecution. Black Sex Worker Collective was able not just to give me funds with mutual aid, but was able to direct me to allies that could help me with housing, that could help me with legal resources. Keeping me visible was a very huge thing. When I had a Metropolitan Police Department special street crimes following me around and posting up details, at all the houses I was staying at and stuff, having people all over the world, regardless of their occupation, that are watching and that are telling the DA and the police in that area, I know that person there and I'm making sure that they're still alive, was absolutely monumental in keep me alive. And I think we see that a lot in the sex work community, even when there's not protests and stuff going on. We have a lot of solidarity, you know, on the streets and even among indoor workers, especially among Black and POC workers. We very much, if you come for one of us, you've come for all of us, and that's what's kept us, you know, a community and an industry for so long.
So my setup was a little bit intentional and leading because I think the first site, understandably, that we go to when thinking about barriers is the state, which is unnecessary. I want to tailor down to think about today's the topic of today's panel, to also pay attention to and have a difficult conversation around the ways in which stigma and shame and violence and persecution and misperceptions don't just happen at the level of the state and the police and these external community members, but actually happen within our own communities. And so to not be leading, I want to ask a question of what do you all understand some of the root causes for the stigmatization, the shaming of sex work within queer, trans, people of color communities, and also the shaming of, or what one might read as, has named as the racism and erasure of Black and brown folks, queer, trans, people of color within the sex worker community. So there's this seemingly duality of kinds of stigmas that are happening in these two spaces, but they are intra-community problems that we don't always hold space for. And I'm curious what
It's a layered question, honey.
go. You have a question?
No, I said that is a very layered question.
Oh yeah,
Thank
no, it
you,
is.
Janelle. Thank you.
We do layers, okay? It's layers, all right? And it's on purpose because I want to give you things to chew on and to digest and chew through, but also
a whole steak, honey. A whole steak.
okay. And now I want you to feed us and deliver, because I know you all have all kinds of thoughts and experiences, and I want to honor your expertise in my asking.
So, is it okay if I chime in first?
Get it?
I think so. First, within the stigmatization within uh, communities, Black and brown communities, let's say cis Black and brown communities, right? Because a lot of times we're excluded from uh, Black liberation movements or liberation movements for people of color, because sex work has historically been stigmatized. It's not seen as labor. It's sex. We don't necessarily live in uh, a sex positive society and world. Sex is often shamed, but sex is wonderful. It's beautiful. It should be celebrated. It is natural too. And I think that also that correlates with how religious doctrine has a lot of power, a lot of equity, political power. So that really coincides with this stigma of sex, right? I grew up as a little Baptist girl in Jersey, and honey, we didn't talk about sex, homosexuality. All of it was shame, shame, shame. So it's we're socialized to have this shame, which creates this stigma. And I think even in queer community, right? We don't want to talk about there's a lot of stigma within queer and LGBT movements and community when it comes to trans folks, when it comes to we other people within community, you know, Black and brown folks face discrimination within the queer community. So if you're Black and brown and disabled and a sex worker and you're trans, you're gonna face a lot of stigma, a lot of barriers, and we're often forgotten. And there is a lot of erasure, right? Because we're navigating so many intersections, and when folks aren't impacted by maybe a disability, or they aren't Black and brown, or they haven't had to do sex work, whether for survival or for whatever reason, just because you wanted to. You know, a lot of the times when something doesn't impact us, uh, it doesn't necessarily matter and have value to us. And so we help perpetuate that stigma.
Okay. I'll go. Uh, so I think it's really important to understand how much morality politics has been one dictated by cis het white supremacy, and also how morality politics has shaped how we view the world in so many very small ways, but that have very big impacts. So sex work is feminized, and the female body is a site of control for white supremacy, and the Black female body doubly so. And so, like, the stigma against, you know, Black and brown bodies doing sex work is that they're kind of going against the expectation, the value that has been assigned to them, and no system likes to be usurped. And you know, so that stigma that starts in cishet white patriarchy, white supremacy, and it comes and it seeps into the queer community because, you know, we have all internalized these toxic narratives, and it's a process to unlearn it, and we are driven to unlearn it when it becomes uncomfortable to us in most cases. And so if you are a queer person who has proximity to this cishet white norm, then it becomes less of an issue for you and less pressing. And, you know, it's less likely that that person will do the work, the very hard work of unlearning these stigmas, these stigmatized expectations. Um, yeah, so I think that's where that comes from. That, you know, it comes from, or us internalizing and, you know, trying to set ourselves, trying to get as far as we can in the mainstream social order in some ways. And I think, you know, I think that that aspiration to being a mainstream, like, good person and a mainstream, like, respectable person makes you less likely to engage with the humanity of people who don't buy into that. And I think that's a big source of stigma for us. Definitely not the only one, but a big source.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely a matter of survival too. When you look at how capitalism is so tied into, the moral politics, the white supremacy, capitalism really reinforces and really rewards this. We see this in sex work too. People who are closer to cis, who are closer to white, who are closer to conventionally attractive, able-bodied, are the ones that make the most money. Even when we're looking in the queer community, even when we're looking in the POC community, you take the intersection of queer and POC, and the ones who are going to be able to work indoors and book for the highest rates and work the least often with the nicest, most secure customers are going to be the ones who get the closest to white femininity. That's what it always comes back to, no matter how much they're seeking us out for blackness, seeking us out for, not being cis. They still want us to be, really close to that because of that morality policing. They don't want to, deal with the ick factor that society puts on us for being Black. And then, if we are also not cis. So our survival, because of capitalism and because of marginalizations, very much gets tied into navigating that in some way. It's hard, it's very painful. A lot of us are able to rebuke it in a lot of ways, but I try to look at it like a hierarchy and not criticize those who might have less societal protection for leaning heavier on, the biases and the white supremacy, even when it affects me. Because, like like the other panelists have said, you know, if you can lean on that, a lot of people will lean on that. I don't have to lean on a lot of the more obvious biases because I'm lighter skin. I have breasts, so I don't have to do as much to cover the lower half of my body because that's going to detract, you know.
So I'm going, it's like slightly off script, but on script because y'all are giving me so much to work with. So I want to think about, or I'm trying to figure out a way to ask a question. So bear with me. And thinking about what Bell Hooks articulates as white supremacist, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, heteropatriarchy, which is precisely exactly what Giselle and Z are talking about, that gets internalized. And then how that internalization as Jay is sharing, requires us to sort of some folks to lean on certain kind of biases. So on one hand, queer, trans, people of color, sex workers are deeply stigmatized. And on the other hot hand, they're also deeply fetishized. So it's this sort of, like there's an obsession, there's a disgust and an obsession simultaneously. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about a bit, and this might just be an extension, to talk about how it is that that you've experienced or you've known people to experience this fetishization, and also the ways that you navigate this fetishization, given that it's, as Jay points out, organized by capitalism and a market of desire and a kind of beauty politics that's predicated on certain kinds of bodies, and that you all are Black and brown bodies. And so there's a navigation that you have to deal with, and I'm wondering if you'd mind sharing some of that too. Also, I hope all that made sense. It's off dome. It's off dome.
I think I want to take a minute just to honor the space of folks that do sex work advocacy and have done sex work, that simply by, to me, it is reclaiming our bodies. And that is simply an act of resistance in itself. The fact that we say you don't get free access to our bodies and we choose, we make the choice, is a form of activism. So any person that may not do formal activism or advocacy, he, she, or they is definitely an activist for reclaiming the space and taking autonomy over their own bodies. You know, is so radical, so important, especially when we think of Black, brown, and queer and trans bodies. Uh, as you said, who have often been that have often been fetishized and used for pleasure, but have not had any equity. Uh, and how do we navigate that? Or how do I navigate that? I think as a Black trans queer woman, even not even not even thinking about the sex work piece, it, I'm always navigating violence. So in order to be able to navigate violence, because of it is just part of the journey, means that I have to surround myself with love, that I have to center my healing, that I have to know, as the beloved Maya Angelou has said, I've already been paid for, that I don't owe anyone a damn thing, that my crown has already been paid for, and that my ancestors and my queer ancestors have paid for me to be here, and I deserve to be here. I deserve to get paid if I want to get paid. I deserve to take up space. I deserve to take up air. I deserve a seat at the table. And I have to remind myself of that. And I think having spaces like this and conversations like this are important in our survival, in our healing, in getting to decriminalization and getting to a space where we have full equity over what we do and who we are.
Yeah. One of the most important things I think that I've learned in my time as a sex worker is how to, and I'm still learning actually, because as a Black woman, I have historically been devalued and I have internalized that devaluation. And being a sex worker definitely has taught me to assert my value and not to negotiate my value. And I think, especially as a Black sex worker, as a Black femme, it is absolutely crucial and far more and so difficult to get to that point, because you just have, just based on how society is set up, you have people coming in just assuming that your prices are supposed to be lower, you know. And even though you'll have a lot of clients, you know, lining up, they're not, you know, they want to negotiate, and they'll try to negotiate in ways that they wouldn't with someone of a different race, or they'll offer rates lower, or when they do come, they'll just treat you with disrespect, and you have to kind of learn your boundaries. And it takes a lot of labor, a lot of emotional labor, a lot of sometimes physical labor to really set up those boundaries and stand by them. And you know, that navigation of fetishization and disgust, like, you know, is very, it's two sides of the same coin in my opinion, because fetishization is an othering, it's not an appreciation of something, it is a fascination at best. It's macabre, it's invasive, it's voyeuristic, and it gives legitimacy to this like conclusion that, you know, Black sex worker bodies are not normal, or are not worthy of respect, or are in some ways deviant and disgusting. um, and I think that is something that we have to navigate daily, and it is, yeah, it's a challenge.
I don't know that I navigate it so well. I don't know that I navigate it so well. I really don't. I started sex work before I had my first dating romantic experience. I Because I was identified so early, I was very heavily fetishized very early on, and I realized pretty early in junior high that probably 60% of people are really going to devalue me based on what they perceive, you know, my gender representation to be. And 40% are going to exalt me as some, you know, magical unicorn that they've got to explore and stuff. And I just kind of got pulled into that 40% of the people. It became my life really early on. It's definitely been really hard to break out of. I do not date cisheads. Don't date heterosexual men at all. That's just a big no category for me. Cisgendered people, cisgendered lesbians, I don't date them at all. I don't form close relationships with them. I watch a lot of Pose and Cry. I really identify with Angel. I have close relationships with trans women, Black trans women. Uh, that's it. That's how I cope with it. I don't have a successful way, but I'm making it. So yeah.
Yes,
Thank
India Moore. Love her.
Absolutely. RIP. The season is coming. It's the last season, so that is which is a question that I didn't think about asking, but I now it's an invitation to ask, which is an invitation about representation, or a conversation around representation that I have some thoughts about in terms of a question that connects to Z's point about white femininity and the construction of the sex worker and how feminist is working, but also to Jay's and Giselle's articulation around gender nonconforming trans intersex folks within the sex worker community. So sex work is very clearly gendered. And we see representations of sex work earnestly that often look like a cisgender white woman, which erases, of course, non-cisgender folks who are participating in sex work folks of color in general, but also there's a way that, and this came up, and I'm building on another panel that I had on sex work in the time of COVID with a member of the Black Sex Workers Collective had joined then, and the way in which cisgender and trans men don't show up or are not represented in conversations around sex work. And so I'm curious if you can talk about how it is that you or talk a bit more rather, because this is what we've been talking about, how it is that you understand the gendering of sex work, how sex work is gendered, who is absent, and the kinds of representations that you see or kinds of representations you want to see more of in relationship to how we're thinking about sex work in a destigmatized, decriminalized way.
Well, I think in general, we do see sex work very gendered, very feminized. We see it, very cis, all that. So I would love to see more representation of non-binary people that don't have to mask as femme, more representation of IS. I know a lot of IS people where we can't mask, our genitals as cis in any way and or have successful careers. It's, kind of the only career we could successfully achieve in. I would like to see more representation of cis men coming out, but I think because it's such a feminized field, and even in the West, we're still not comfortable talking about male homosexuality, cis homosexuality, which is wild to me. It's so common. It's everywhere. It's been around forever. But there's still a big stigma against men doing anything that's not hypermask, patriot based. So I think that's kind of why you see that exclusion, even of trans men, because there's some feminization and some softening going on. So I would definitely like to see more of that. It's there. I think the reason we don't see it is just because you want to feminize this field, and that harsh binary dichotomy. You want to feminize this field and really masculinize all the consumers. They're all these straight-laced businessmen or macho beer drinking abusers, which is just not the reality.
I think, so I think so sex work is feminized, right? And there's this obsession with femininity, and it comes from a very patriarchal standpoint. Z said it before, having ownership and control over the femme body, and then if you are have a femme body of color, how that adds another layer to that. I also think that I am a believer in collective accountability, right? Too. I also think I've been to spaces where trans men also did not speak up and say that they have done sex work. So you also have to step into the conversation. And I know that's courageous. And non binary folks have to step into the conversation. I think us as uh, trans femmes almost really haven't had a choice because we are fetishized so much, and we have to navigate so much violence, and it's so visible. We almost don't have a choice to speak up. It's part of us, our survival. I think a lot of trans masculine folks uh, may not want to talk about it. It may be uncomfortable. And that's that internalized stuff when we think about femininity too, like what that looks like, and that we all, whether you identify as masculine or femme, we all have the god and the goddess, and that there is this beautiful spectrum of identity. And I think when we get to a place that we embrace all the intersections, beautiful intersections of ourselves, then we'll break through that. But I also think folks have to step into uh, that courage, their courageousness, and say, I'm a masculine person and I've done sex work. And talking about cis gay men, I think there's a lot of layers there. I think when I think within spaces for cis gay men, that they do talk about sex work. They've done sex work, but there's also uh, this hierarchy of worth when we think of white masculine or certain bodies that are desired too. And there is a lot of violence that gay cis men have perpetrated towards Black and brown queer folks, Black and brown trans femme folks that we often don't talk about, that we definitely need to have conversations about. So I don't think they necessarily believe that their liberation is connected to ours, which is why they're probably not going to show up to a space and conversation necessarily like this, right? Because their bodies may be a little safer than ours, but not really. It's all interconnected. None of us are free until we all are, and that's real.
Okay, before I ask next question, Z, I didn't know if you had a response. You're also not obligated to have a response. Okay, so I'm going to, I'm looking at Z.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Sorry about that. So I will say, I just want to acknowledge my privilege here because I am cis. I am, I'm a cis woman, and that comes with a lot of privilege, especially in sex work and being, more or less conventionally attractive also gives me an advantage. However, still, even with those privileges, we have to contend with the idea that we are with being stripped of our humanity and being reduced to like a feminine object. I don't have to be in the room to do my work, basically, because I'm not seen as a person. So I think personally, I would like the representation I would like to see from my perspective is representation that affirms our humanity and affirms like the different reasons why people do sex work, the different experiences that people have in sex work, and the different people who do sex work, because it is such a diverse set of fields. Like, it's not even one field, it's a set of professions that are just so diverse. And if we're going to combat the stigma that we're facing, then first and foremost, we have to get our stories out there, because people don't understand what they can't see, people will not just question themselves. We have to kind of like hold our space and assert ourselves, and hopefully like allies will hold space for us.
So before I ask this, what will be the last question before we open it up? I'm going to encourage the audience to start dropping questions that they have in the chat now. And so Z, I was also sort of naming, because in the background I see liberation as the plan. And I really love that. And I really like that. I feel like that's what partially we've been talking about. So I'm going to ask you all also a very chewy, meaty question, but I'm going to try to sprinkle some sauce on it so it's not so, it's more digestible. I'm curious if you can talk about what the plan for liberation for in your mind, what liberation looks like, and particular and with an eye towards the role that LGBTQ plus folks play in that liberation, and whether this is about policy, about ideology, about structural changes, whatever that might be. So that was my sauce of like here. So I think that it is important for us to map out that liberation and to talk about how folks can aid in that liberation so that it looks like the liberation that you want instead of the liberation that they want for you. And so on that, before we turn up to audience questions, can you map us to, no small task, I admit, map us to and through your idea of what liberation looks like?
Terrence, can you repeat that, please?
I just want you, I'm taking this liberation as the plan. And I think you all have an idea about what a more just world would look like, what liberation for Black, brown, queer, trans, of color, sex workers looks like. And if we center your experiences and your notions of liberation, what does that look like and how do we get there? I'm not asking you for the plan, but I'm asking you for what your vision is.
I'll go. So actually that graphic says reparations is the foundation, liberation is the plan. And that is important because one of the things I've learned, especially in working, alongside sex worker activists, is that you can dismantle the oppressive systems with, like, you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. So we have to then create our own systems and our own structures. And unfortunately, in capitalism, these structures must conform in many ways to the demand for, the need for capital and this industrial complex. And it's a balancing act. No, ultimately, I believe that reparations are important, and reparations being the money that we are owed and not money with strings attached, not charity, not outreach, like reparations. That is money we are owed, that we are entitled to do whatever we want to do with, that we are entitled to build our communities with. And if we can, and not just money, but also support and resources, but money by support and resources. So I think liberation is for us to take charge of our narratives. And I think we're doing that. And we started, and at this point, we're pushing the stories that we are writing because we're definitely expressing our experiences into the world, and we're getting feedback, and we're being heard finally, after a lot of persecution, like, we're being heard. And it's just important that we continue to bring up other marginalized communities as we're being heard, and to get together in solidarity with, in all the communities that intersect should need to get together in solidarity. And that way we can liberate ourselves, because together we are stronger, together we outnumber, those who would oppress us. So if we can find those common grounds, I think that's a great place to start.
So for me, the world that I would envision would be, for one, I think things start with conversation. So mm, having having hard conversations and not running from those, where we can be compassionate, we can honor and hear each other and have hard conversations, so we can find ways uh, to cultivate healing and resolutions that honor all of us as human beings holistically. I think for trans, queer, disabled folks of color who are in the sex trade industry, uh, us being paid well, us being paid to be the experts, us being in leadership roles, that we don't need a savior, honey, because we can save ourselves. We are the sheroes and heroes and saviors in this story. Also, I think of a culture and communities and allies and advocates and friends that are accountable, and I think accountability, uh, as Dee said, I'm about that reparation life too. Send me a check, but not just a check, resources, access. I want it all, make it rain. Uh, that is very important. And a world that we are safe. We deserve to feel safe. We deserve access to safe spaces. Uh, and I think we have to continue to create safe spaces. And when we're not safe in spaces, we all have to rally together and hold folks accountable for making those spaces unsafe for certain folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that both of them just said. I think that, a world ideally should look like less restrictions, less hands-on, not more restrictions. I think it looks like queers with more access and more ability sharing that. I had white drag queens in Eugene, Oregon hide me in their basement, at the point that I was all over the media in Portland and stuff like that. That's what it looks like to me. So it looks like people helping me, with my hair and stuff like that, so that when the media is doing, this public smear campaign and stuff, I'm safe with skills that I don't have myself. People opening their literal house, sharing resources beyond $20 here and there, sharing a feed here and there, actually, unasking some privilege. So
Thank you for sharing your visions, and I co-sign. And Z, I'm sorry, I did not. I thought that was reparations, but I didn't want to misrepresent what the graphic said. But I was like, I hope that's reparations. So I'm very glad that it is. So now we want to carve. We have 17 minutes, I think, to do for audience Q&As. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. You might also have been sending them to Joey or Kai, but make your questions legible is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we actually, me and Kai actually got some sent to us. One that we have, what do you have any tips or any advice for people who might begin wanting to start sex work?
I think I might be the newbie here, so I'll take a stab at that, like from my perspective. I found that the things that kept me very safe in sex work, and again, this is a privilege because while I do survival sex work, I was not desperate at the time, and I did have support. I did have other sex workers around me who gave me support, who gave me guidance, and I feel like that kept me safe in the early days while I was figuring out how to navigate, how to avoid harassment, how to figure out who means me well and who doesn't. And again, the networks are important. These informal networks that sex workers rely on, they are important from the jump. Another thing is that, if it's important to know why you're doing it. It's important to understand yourself, what your boundaries are, what your limitations are, and to be true to that, because ignoring your boundaries and ignoring your limitations can definitely cause significant long-term harm, both physically, emotionally, psychologically, all of it. And so it takes, a certain amount of reflection that a lot of people might not immediately assume that it does. to really be aware of what you're doing when you enter sex work, and it's definitely not something that should be taken lightly.
I think I would really invite, I would, I echo a lot of what Z said. You need to really have a conversation with yourself. Why are you getting into sex work? Because I do understand that it's glamorized and it's romanticized, but the hustle is real. This work ain't easy. It is not fancy hotels and champagne bottles. That's not it. Most of us are not making six figures. And some of us ain't making five. It is very hard work. And I would say, number one, make sure, have a clear vision of why you're doing it, have a contract with yourself. As Dee said, your boundaries, you need to have a contract with yourself. What are your boundaries? What are some of the things you will do, you won't do? And you need to stick with that and be clear and not take any pushback, because clients and folks will push back and will try to push your boundaries. And it's easy to lose yourself in this work. Also, you have to prioritize your mental and physical uh, health, and that may look different for everyone, but you have to prioritize your mental, physical health and self-care. You have to know when to take a break, and all money is not good money.
I don't give advice to newbies. I don't think it's safe for me to give advice to newbies. I co-sign what they said.
So thank you so much for everyone for answering that.
There
We
was
have one
one
more.
thing, sorry, I wanted
Oh,
to
go ahead.
add, always have a safety plan too. Always have a safety plan. Because whether you get paid or someone gyps you or whatever, we want you to stay alive. Always have a safety plan. Have a safety plan.
Thank y'all so much for that. We have another question in chat. What role has colorism or fat phobia played into your own experiences within the sex worker community?
As much as I talk about it being, a really tight knit community and stuff, not everybody has your best interest, and the world of sex work is a microcosm of society. Nothing magically disappears. Racism is still there. Fat phobia is still there. Colorism is still there. Whorephobia is still there. There's internalized whorephobia. I personally tend to market as fit. I used to be a professional competing bodybuilder. I get a lot of comments on my weight all the time. If I gain 5 pounds, people say I gained 15 pounds. Um, I update my photos weekly. Before I go to an appointment, I send somebody a photo with no angles, no filters right before I walk out of the door, and I can still have somebody say that I'm 20 pounds heavier. Throw a huge fit. It's very real. It's very much there. On the colorism, I get asked, what race I am. I get, told negative comments about Black women and about Middle Eastern women, people not realizing that I'm mixed with both. So yeah, sex work is a microcosm, and people feel like you don't have any recourse to advocate for yourself. So sometimes you get it like times 10 of what you would in society.
What Jay said. I mean, it's just something you have to navigate. Fat phobia, uh, racism, all those things, colorism. We know it's a real thing, so it doesn't change within uh, within the sex work community. There is we live in a world where there is this hierarchy of human worth, unfortunately. So if you have darker skin and you're bigger and you have a disability, we are often told that we have less value. The thing is, that shit ain't true. That's all.
Yeah, similar to Jay's experiences, and I was just chuckling to myself because I also have an issue. Even though I don't edit my photos, I don't touch up or anything. I still have people, walk out or just insult me or write to me online just to tell me that I'm fat and ugly or that I'm too dark, and I live in Germany. I live in Berlin, and it's very white. The fetishization is what keeps me fed. And it's a really difficult space to navigate when you're capitalizing on this negative attention and turning it into something not necessarily positive, but something that, or not even, something that is not necessarily positive and something that is not necessarily safe, but it gets you by. It's your survival, and we're here, and we play the hand we're dealt. We have to survive, and navigating this colorism, this racism, this fat phobia is just part of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I just want to add that sometimes they will really, like, clients will really just be messing with you. Sometimes it'll just be time wasters or whatever who will just hit you up to tell you that you are unattractive and worth nothing and all that. And they'll just hit on all those societal things, have no interest in seeing you or whatever. Like people just feel that we're easy punching bags. And I had one person who never saw me, had no reviews of ever seeing anybody, and spent 4 years hitting me up from different phone numbers, different email addresses, just to tell me what trash I am. It's not a disgruntled client, was somebody that never saw anyone, just wanted to tell me that I'm ugly, unattractive, all these racist terms, all this stuff.
Why they mad? Why they mad?
So in the absence of another question in the chat, um, I'm going to try to come up with another question that I thought I literally did.
I
Oh,
actually, yeah.
Joey got it. Joe. Okay, never mind. Just kidding. I was just trying to eat time. We good.
So we actually have two questions that we can end it with. One a kind of fun one more that we can really end it. So one is thank y'all so much for being here. I just want to know, what are your favorite songs at the moment?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I've been listening to Jerome by Lizzo on repeat. On repeat. And then I punctuate that with Montero. That's literally all I'm listening to these days.
Gosh, I love music. This is a hard one. Uh, Coke and Henny, Part 2 by Pink Sweats. My Girlfriends Are My Boyfriends, Demi Lovato. Creepin' by Riley. And let's see, what else are we doing? Some Cardi B, Barty Cardi. Anything I can get my life and sprinkle my black girl magic makes me feel good.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling female black MCs right now. Koi Ray, Glitter Money. So Koi Ray, No More Parties, that's mine because that's like her song about her dad, Benzino, who's got like some public attention. So hearing the child of a famous black male artist who's got like not a positive relationship come out and get like her chance to talk about him, I'm all about that. And then Glitter Money. So this is two queer activists, a Black woman and a white woman, and they've got a group. They've got this song, Dangerous. I really love that. It's about the riots, but the track sounds like a spell to me. That's what I really love about it. I put it on with my candles, kind of chant and howl with it. That's kind of what I'm feeling lately.
Thank y'all so much for that. I love
Can
it.
I add something? So shout out to Shay Diamond. Okay. I am her. Yes, yes, yes. I am her forever. Check it out. If you don't know who Shay Diamond is, you are not living your best life. That's all.
Thank you all so much for all those amazing recommendations. Last question, it's a good one. Going forward from this event, what do you want the people who've been watching to do in order to advocate and be good allies to sex workers and the sex worker community?
Stop using the word hoe for everything. I'm gonna say that's my pet peeve. I don't know that it's gonna make a big social change, but everyone using the word hoe for everything, kind of devaluing it, kind of gets on me. And making more space for the sex workers that aren't as pretty and glamorous, the ones that, like Giselle mentioned earlier, don't have stacks as high as Shaq, that aren't all driving in Beamers and Benzes, that maybe aren't on OnlyFans, making more space for them to be the voices and face of sex work that you elevate. Maybe someone with less than 5,000 followers share the stuff sometimes.
Yeah, and I think like the biggest danger that I face is dehumanization. You know, the people that pose a threat to me are people who do not see me as a whole person, but just as a sex worker, just as a sex object, you know, just as a receptacle. And that is not just insulting, but also quite threatening to my physical safety. And so we have to challenge that narrative of sex workers as just sex workers and nothing else. And we do that by private conversations, you know, conversations at the dinner table, you know, conversations with your family where we talk, where, you know, and you have to kind of have these uncomfortable conversations until they're not uncomfortable anymore. And if we have to face those conversations every day, and we do, because people have no filter when they're asking questions, if we have to have those conversations every day, then allies, if you're an ally, then the best you can do is have those conversations when they come up. And I promise they won't come up as often for you as they do for us. So, you know, just that is one way that you can hold space for sex workers, even if you don't know any. Just inform yourself and bring that information into your networks.
I would say it's important to leverage your privilege. If you have privilege, leverage that. That means standing in solidarity, speaking up when it's not popular, when it's not cute, when we're not on a Zoom panel, when it's not the key. Also investing into sex work liberation, into movement liberation. That means we all have a PayPal, a Venmo, and whatever. You are welcome to donate because we are doing this work. So put your money where your mouth is. I always say that because that's very important, right? Uh, really investing in us and the folks that are doing the work and being a true ally. That means speaking up, having our back, and leveraging your privilege. I cannot say that enough. If you are allowed into rooms, making sure that we get into those rooms and we're safe and we have a seat at the table too. So we're able to advocate and share our narratives and put us in leadership roles, pay us for our expertise. If you ask us to be on a panel, if you ask us for a consult, pay us, pay us, pay us, pay us, pay us, pay us, pay us.
Wow. This has, it is unfortunately time.
You falling asleep, Terrence?
No, no. I'm getting my
I'm
life. No,
teasing. I'm
no, no,
teasing.
no. I would transfixed. Okay, that's what's happening. All right, I get
All
caught.
right now.
I'm at church, but not like the homophobic version that I grew up in, but like the get your life kind of church, right? This is a different spirit, all right? And so you all have delivered multiple words. And for that, it's not just about, and I want to really, really emphasize this, particularly as a scholar. You all didn't just share your experiences. Sometimes I really get annoyed when people say that, like, thank you for sharing your experiences. No. What you all did is you all provided an astute analysis. You just delivered a level of intellectual labor that so many people wish that they could produce. And so thank you for the work that you have done, that you continue to do, the intellectual contributions that you have made. You're modeling what it means to be a scholar beyond and outside of, and even thinking what a classroom is and who an educator is. And so I want to first and foremost acknowledge the reality that you all came on camera in a world where in which you're hyper surveilled as Black and brown and queer and gender nonconforming and trans and sex workers, and you shared your stories and you shared your analysis and you spoke truth to power, and you did so while being recorded. And I don't take that lightly. And so we can't say that we recognize the violences that happen without actually recognizing also the ways in which you all show up every day in spite of and against those violences, and you put your literal bodies on the line to teach us how it is that violence is operating, but also to teach us an alternative way to be in the world. And so I am forever grateful for that work that you do and the work that you have done. To the RCSGD, thank you for carving this space. I'm going to first ask folks to, with a round of reactions, give it up for our amazing panelists. There's so much more work to be done. Watching them will show us how to do it. And now I want to ask the folks who have helped organize this panel to use the raise hand function. And if you can, and you're in a safe space to do so, turn on your camera. I'm going to ask you to use the raise hand function because hypothetically that should put you at the top of the screen to the immediate left. Because I want to also make legible the folks who have done this, who did the work to organize this panel as well. So that I see Joey, I see Kai gonna raise Kai's hand. That's happening. I know Dwayne is still up in here. And so there's that. And so it takes a collective to make these spaces possible. And so I really want to honor and thank the work that you all have. There you go, Dwayne. That's what's up. Okay. Let's not, all right. Dwayne has been holding it down in the back, in the operating, holding the technical part down, but also has been doing, really transforming the campus and asking the campus to focus on the lived experiences of queer, trans, folks of color, and and carving space for more of those conversations to be happening. And so we thank Dwayne and Craig for doing that work. And lastly, I want to thank the audience members who showed up and you performed a kind of radical listening. So if our panelists performed a radical vulnerability that's rooted in a bravery and courage, you all, that Giselle named and invited us to be more courageous, you all performed a radical listening, and it is very valuable to have focused people who are there to bear witness. So we ask, hopefully, that you do more than just bear witness, but that you take this as an opportunity, an invitation to do something about it. And our amazing guests have told you the types of things that you can do. And I would encourage you to follow all of them to check out their collectives. I see that Zia's, I'm gonna give you all a last bit a chance. I know we're a little bit over, but what is time? Time is, I'm on Black queer people time. It goes, Star Slade goes over, okay? I told you this was church, all right, this is, I wanna give you all an opportunity to just name, for the panelists to name anything that you're working on that we could support, a handle that we can follow you at, or an organization that you think that we should get tapped into before we leave, just so we don't lose that in particular. And I'm also, is because I see like Z is literally advertising an event. All right, Jay, got you.
Yeah, J St. James on Facebook, Dead Flexi on Instagram, and also I'm starting up an LLC that's specific for criminalized people now that I have my first felony. So it's called RACE. It's the acronym for Revolutionaries, Anarchists, Criminalized, and Expats, RACE on Instagram.
As can be seen behind me, the Black Sex Worker Collective is putting on our first sex worker conference in June, June 17th to 19th. It is, so the theme is reparations is the foundation, liberation is the plan, and it's an intersectional endeavor. We are going to have presentations from all disciplines: reproductive justice, environmental rights, housing justice, anything that affects sex workers in any way, because we all know it's all related. So yeah, you follow the BSWC on Instagram or the Black SWC on Twitter. And we'll be putting out updates about the performances and the panels and how to get tickets. So yeah, follow us.
I put all my stuff in the chat. So New Jersey Rua, Gender Fab, yeah.
Can you shout it out though? Only because it's a video recording, and so they don't have that.
So you can check out all things Giselle and what I'm doing, genderfab.com. That's genderfab, FAB.com. New Jersey, njrua.org. For all things sex work advocacy. And we're also on Gender Fab and New Jersey Rua are both on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to hand it over to Joel or Kai and let them officially close this out.
Thank you all so much. First, okay, although give it up for Professor Terrence Wooten for facilitating, who left himself out of the commendations. Couldn't have done without you, and we thank you so much, Professor Wooten. Thank you all so much for being here. To the audience, to Kai and Dwayne for helping me start this idea, to Professor Wooten for facilitating, and especially to Jay, Z, Giselle. The work y'all do is so important, and we're so honored to have you here today. Truthfully, honestly, just thank you. And thank you all so much for being here. This has been Demystifying and Destigmatizing Sex Work in the Queer Community. We hope to see you all next time. Thank you all so much.